Yeah, participate with me so I can kind of gauge your level of knowledge or if you're understanding what I'm saying. In between, I do have a slight accent, so to make sure that you understand. Sometimes if I speak too fast, I kind of put the words together. You'll see that in a minute. So I try to slow down. So what I was saying is when you're learning the federal legislative process is just kind of know the order in which the event occurred. That the Declaration of Independence, Articles of Confederation, U.S. Constitution ratified in 9 states, and then you have the U.S. Constitution. Again, I'm not going to be going in order, but I'm going to start off kind of slow just to get you an idea. When you're studying, when you're reviewing, is you need to ensure that you have a flow of the information, not just being all over the place, but understand how things started and what brought us to where we are and how we get our budget today. It makes it easier, again, test taking tips. It makes it easier when you take an exam if you can visualize. Like you've heard people say they have a photographic memory. All we do is we study the same information in different manners, in different ways, several times so that we can understand the information. So the roles of the responsibilities is understanding. According to the Constitution, the government is broken down into 3 branches of government. What are the 3 branches of government? I'm going to start off easy. So I'm going to be asking questions and looking for feedback from you guys on the phone line, since y'all can talk to me. All right, what are the 3 branches of government based on the way in which I taught them? What's the first one?
Legislative.
Legislative branch. All right, come on. Legislative branch. Second is the executive branch. And the third is the judicial branch. The significance of learning them in that order: legislative or Congress, executive or the president, judicial or the courts, is that it directly aligns with Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 of the Constitution. So right there, you've got that knowledge. Where in the Constitution does it cover what Congress can do? If you learn legislative branch, then it is Article 1. So what are some of the things in Article 1 that the Congress is allowed to do? Not we, unless you're part of Congress. Just throw some stuff at me. Make laws. What else? Right? The function of the legislative branch, they make the laws. What are some other things under Article 1? Raise taxes, right? They can raise taxes, borrow money. The House of Representatives serve how many years? How many year terms does the House of Representatives serve? 2-year terms. And how many years does the senator serve? 6-year terms. So what I'm doing is, at this point, when you first start reading the study guide, you're reading word for word like it's a book. You're trying to know who done it, who did it, why did they do it, how they did it, what did they do, right? So now at this point, you should be able to pull out, just look at the topic, Article 1, okay, it governs raise taxes, borrow money, senators, 6-year term, House of Representatives, 2-year terms. The president has to submit the budget to Congress no later than 10 days. What is it? Within 10 days, he has to submit the bill. Yeah, the bill. And then, far as no money can come out the Treasury unless you have an appropriation law in place. So all of those things are covered under Article 1 of the Constitution. Article 2, what is the duties and responsibilities of the executive branch under Article 2? The president. So the president is the commander-in-chief, and the executive branch executes the laws, right? So legislative makes the laws, executive branch. So it's just basic, but you have to start here to build up to why things function the way they do today. It all started here in the Constitution. So there's a point where the president introduces legislation to the legislative branch. When does the president typically do that? Let's see if anyone remembers that. When does the president introduce legislation? During the State of the Union address. That's correct. So that's all part of that Article 2. During the State of the Union address, the president would typically provide his agenda for the upcoming year. And Article 3, the courts, they interpret the laws. So you have to know the basic functions of the three branches of government, the articles in which they come. There are in the Constitution, the do's and don'ts, and the functions. Because if the scenario you read on a test and it says under Article 2, the Congress is allowed to do X, Y, Z, is this true or false? Well, you already know it's not aligned correctly because Article 2 does not govern Congress. Article 2 governs the executive branch. So when you know what right looks like, it's easier for you to determine what's not correct. All right, so what are the different ways in which we can get legislation? Origination of a legislation, like a bill. Where does a bill generate?
39.4.
If you don't want to speak to the group, please mute your phone so we don't listen to you. You don't want us to hear your conversation.
It could be recommended by the president or introduced by members or committees.
Okay, so it's either originated by the president, and we already just discussed that, either through the State of the Union address to a congressional committee or a congressional member. That's how they introduce a bill. What is a bill? Like I said, you want to start off kind of slow. What is a bill? We talk about them, but you got to understand what they are.
Proposal.
So a general letter of proposal is if you want something to become law, the document that it's written on is called a bill. So it's a proposal. You have a bill, you have joint resolutions, you have concurrent resolution, you have simple resolution. Which ones need to go to the president for them to be effective, for them to be law, for them to be rule, for them to be followed? Of those four discussed, which ones go to the president for signature?
Bills and joint resolutions.
The bill, that's correct. The bills and the joint resolution. They all go to the president for the president to sign for them to be effective. And typically, if they want to change the Constitution, they will use the joint resolution. Concurrent are things that happen in both the House and both the Senate. So when we move on to the budget process and we talk about the budget resolution process, that's a concurrent action. See, it's like I'm telling a story, right? I'm going through the study guide, flipping pages and telling the story. That's how you do it. It'll make it easier for you to remember. So concurrent action is what happens in the budget resolution process. That is the point where Congress decides. Remember, Congress has a House of Representatives and a Senate, two sides for every single function. And so the budget resolution process is handled by the House Budget Committee and the Senate Budget Committee. You need to know both of those. It's a concurrent action because the same thing is happening on both sides. They're both looking at the same bill, and then they're coming up with the guidelines in the budget resolution. And so Congress has a resource management office. What is the title? What is the name of that office? What is the name of the office, the Resource Management Office for Congress? The Congressional Budget Office, you said? That's correct. CBO. Just remember, every organization has a resource manager. All right, so let's go ahead to the next step. What is the name of the resource manager at the executive level? The CFO. What else? What other title?
OMB.
OMB, right? Office of Management and Budget. And let's take it down to the Department of Defense. What is the DOD's resource manager called? What is their title? The USD Comptroller. That's correct. Thank you for helping me there. The USD Comptroller. All of those titles, those and who they serve is important in this process. So think of it as if you are doing a puzzle, and if I take all the pieces of the puzzle apart, would you know to put OMB to the executive branch, Congressional Budget Office, CBO to Congress? Would you know to put USD Comptroller to DOD? That's when you know you're ready for the test. If you can take the pieces apart, mix it up, and then come up with the right response. The budget resolution process, does it go to the president for the president to sign? Does it go to the president? Remember what we said the purpose of? No, it doesn't, right? Because the purpose of the budget resolution process is for Congress to determine the limitations and the guidelines they're going to use as they review the president's budget. And so it does not go to the president. So which House and which Senate is responsible for the budget resolution process? The House and Senate Budget Committee. All right, you got to come a little quicker. I got you on that one. All right, I'm going to pause a little bit long. I can't pause too long because I'm also recording on Facebook, and it kind of looks funny because all they can see is me. I don't know if they can hear you, and so I can't pause for too long, so bear with me. All right, so the House and Senate Budget Committee. All right, so what's the second phase of the budget process? When it gets to Congress. Once the president submits the budget to Congress, what is the second phase after the budget resolution process?
Authorization process?
The authorization process. So what happens at the authorization? What is the purpose of the authorization process? This is one that always gets people.
Approve programs.
Approve programs. That's it. Even if the question you read and it says, okay, in the authorization law, $5 million was approved for this program, Program A. And in the appropriation, $2 million was approved for Program A. How much funding do you have? With that, you have $2 million, whatever the appropriation. So authorization only approves the programs, even if funding is listed in there. Which House and which Senate is responsible for the authorization process? And now pause. The HASC and the SAS. And make sure you know what they stand for and not just the acronym. Because I promise you, one of you going to come back and say, yeah, they had a lot of HASC and SAS, but I didn't remember. Is it the House Armed Services Committee? Is it the House Appropriation Service Committee? When you're taking a test, the anxiety alone of taking a test will make you start second guessing yourself. So that's why you have to make sure you know the information that's in the study guide. It is not 100% of everything that you will see on the exam, but it is at least 90% that will get you to pass the exam if you know what's in the study guide back and front. If once you go through module 1, 2, and 3, you'll see that the information overlaps. And so information that's mentioned in one module is also mentioned in the other. So the authorization process occurs the same on the House and the Senate. The House Armed Services Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee. They meet on their floors, they vote over the budget, and then there's a point where they come together. Why do they need to come together? What are your thoughts?
Conference.
They come together in a conference. Why? What's the purpose of that conference?
Come to resolve any issues.
To resolve issues. That's correct. So, again, you got two different sides, but only one document can go to the president for the president to sign. So they have to resolve all their differences. And when they come together to resolve differences, that is the conference committee or the third chamber. Does the authorization program go to the president for the president to sign? Let me repeat. We said the budget resolution process does not go to the president. The next step is the authorization process. Does the authorization process ends with the document going to the president for the president to sign, for it to become effective? And the answer to that question is yes.
Yes.
Yes. The answer is yes, because the authorization ends up being the authorization law. In order for it to become law, it has to go to the president. And then you have the third congressional action, which is, what's the third phase of the congressional action after authorization?
Appropriations.
The appropriation, the one that gives us budget authority, gives us funding. So now we move to the authorization. We move from the authorization to the appropriation process. Now understand, even though I'm jumping from one to the other, a lot of these things are happening simultaneously. Because if you notice, it's a different House and a different Senate that's responsible for each one of these processes. So if you remember the PPBE process, plan, program, budget, execution, these processes are continuously occurring. So it's not just one's happened, then the next one happened, then the next one happened. They can be happening at the same time. So the appropriation process is handled by the House Appropriation Committee and the Senate Appropriation Committee. The first one and this one should be easy to remember because the name is in the House and the Senate. Only the authorization is the armed services, which is a little different. So the process is exactly the same in the appropriation. House and the Senate, they take it on their floors, they vote on the budget and the appropriation. They're specifically looking on those 12 different appropriations, what they're going to approve, not approve, limitation, fences, ceilings, floors, all of those good stuff. And then at some point, they have to come together because Murphy's Law, they're never going to completely agree. So they come together, and when they come together, what's the term? It is called the conference, a conference committee. So I'm trying to, what I'm trying to do is repeat the different questions. Same question, different ways. That's what I'm trying to say. So a conference. So anytime you hear the word conference committee, you're going to sit there taking your test. Why she keep talking about conference? Conference is when the House and the Senate comes together to resolve differences. Another thing about conference, because I know I had it on my test way back when, and I heard a few other people who've come back and say, yep, I remember I saw that, is if they say, let's say on a test that, okay, the House, in the conference, the House sends 5 members, the Senate sends 2 members to the conference. Who has the advantage? It's a trick question because no one has an advantage. There's no advantage. Is the House, no matter how many people, and they always take extra people. They can need somebody to bring the supporting documents, bring the books. So they may take more than one person, but the bottom line is they speak as a group. The House speaks as a group. The Senate speaks as a group. So it doesn't matter how many members are sitting there, then they vote to determine what decisions they want to make. Does the appropriation process ends with the document going to the president for the president to sign?
Yes.
That should be a quick yes. Yes, it does. You don't have an appropriation until it gets back, which is, if you think about the process, it's the president submits the budget to Congress. Congress goes through the budget, votes on the budget, then they submit it back to the president for the president to sign for it to become appropriation law, for it to become a law. All right, of the 12 appropriations, which one are defense related, DOD related? So of the 12 appropriations, let me repeat, which ones are DOD related appropriations? So you have defense, of course, right? What's the other two?
Military construction.
Military construction / Veterans Affairs. So they put VA and MILCON together. And what's the third one?
Energy and water development.
Energy and water development. So you need to know, because it's a DOD exam, you at least need to know which of the 12 appropriations out there, and they gave you a list in the study guide, which of the 12 is defense related. Defense, military construction, Veterans Affairs, energy and water development. Okay, who can tell me, why does the government shut down if we don't have an appropriation law in place? So let's do some recap. Because it's a big deal. We just got another CR, right? They just voted another CR that goes to 11 March, I think. So why do we need CRs, continuing resolutions? What are your thoughts? And I know we live, eat, and breathe CRs, so everybody should be answering. Oh, come on now. Y'all too quiet on me.
We have.
There you go. What you got? Why do we need CRs? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
As a temporary funding gap.
A temporary funding gap. And then so I ask you again, why do we need a temporary funding gap?
According to Article 1, Section 9, the money shall be drawn from the Treasury. So if there is no law for new funding, and in order for us to not shut down the government, we need a CR to fill in that gap.
There you go. So that's the level of detail that you have to get to. The reason the government shut down goes back when we started with, if you go back to Article 1 and Section 9, if you read that again, you see it says, if you don't have an appropriation law or in our case, they created this temporary appropriation, the government shuts down because the law says you can't take any money out of the Treasury without an appropriation law in place. So that's how you interpret that. So that's the reason we need continuing resolutions. Temporary band-aid to hold things over so that we can still be spending money out of the Treasury until we get an appropriation law in place. All right, so what are some of the guidelines under the Temporary Appropriation Act? What are our restrictions?
You can't spend more than what you spent
Okay, so it's a temporary appropriation, stopgap. We can't spend, so we got to keep the same rate of operation as we did in the previous years. What is another big stipulation when you use the continuing resolution? When we operate under that. What about contracts? Because it's crazy, but it seems like financial managers, we're the only ones that really understand the CR or care, because you still have units and organizations, they have great ideas, they want to do a new contract, and you have to keep reminding them, yeah, but we're still operating under CR. We didn't do that last year, so we can't spend that much. So you got to remember that. So you're limited to rate of operation from previous year and no new starts. No new projects, no new ideas. Let's go ahead and just keep operating them. All right, while we're talking about CR, next question that triggers in my mind is, if I'm operating under the CR and I spend $5 million, Congress appropriates the money and they only give me $4 million. Have I committed an ADA violation? Think about it.
No.
No, why not?
Under CR?
Go ahead. So you say under CR. Go ahead.
If we're operating under the amount from last year, the lesser amount.
Okay, so as long as I'm operating under the same, when I'm under the CR, as long as I'm operating under the rules of the CR, and last year I spent $5 million the same time last year, there's no issue. It just means that probably internally you're gonna have to do some cutback somewhere to get caught back up, because Congress is not gonna give you an additional $1 million. But think about those things. So when you know what right looks like, it's easier for you to figure out what is wrong. All right. What are the two things that happens after Congress appropriates the funds? So once the funds are appropriated, President signs it, becomes law. What are the two major steps that happen? Who can tell me?
The Treasury issues warrants.
Right. So the one that's tied back to that law, to that Article 1, is the legal step, is the Treasury issuing the Treasury warrant. What does that mean? All that simply means is a Treasury sending out notification. Once they receive the appropriation law that's been enacted, then the Treasury is saying, okay, your account's been set up. You can start charging. So that's basically for lack of a better explanation, of explaining what the Treasury warrant is. So what's the second stream of things that has to happen? Does the funds automatically get to DOD and the Department of State and Department of Education? Just because Congress appropriates the money, does the fund automatically get to those entities? Do you automatically get your funds once the appropriation has been approved? Maybe you know something I don't know. Go ahead.
You have to request for apportionment.
You have to request. I remember we're talking DOD level. This is a DOD exam, so I gotta keep reminding, because people tend to focus on the level that they're at. No, you're focusing at the DOD level. So once Congress appropriates, Treasury issues the Treasury warrant, or it may be called the Appropriations warrant, just in case you see either one. And the second thing that happened is OMB begins the apportionment process. How does that process work? The first 10 days, what has to happen in that apportionment process? Okay, so the agencies have to submit an SF-132 apportionment document requesting whatever Congress approved for them. They're requesting it, but chances are just because funds was approved for an organization doesn't mean that the hire is going to send them exactly what they want or what was approved. So when Congress appropriates the funds, the agencies have 10 days to submit their SF-132 to Office of Management and Budget requesting their funds. And how long does OMB have after that to send them their funds?
30 days.
30 days. So OMB has 30 days to issue their apportionment. So I'm slowing down so we can repeat all those A words. We talk about authorization, appropriation, apportionment. Anytime you hear apportionment, OMB apportions funds. That's the term that's used. All right, so the funds are now at the DOD. What does DOD issue down to its subordinates? What is it called then? And everyone knows it. What do you get from your hire? What is the funding type?
Allotment.
Allotment, right? We always say, oh, we haven't gotten our allotment yet. That's why, because when it comes from OMB down to the subordinates, it's called an allotment. So all of those terms is important, because when you get to fiscal law and ADA violation, and I say you violated apportionment versus violating appropriation, then you can understand and think of what level am I when they're talking about this. So, can the president defer or rescind funds without going back to Congress? Does the president have a right? He's the president, or she. Can they say, if Congress appropriated the money to do ABC, can the president say, you know what, I don't want to do ABC, I want to do XYZ? Can the president do that? What are your thoughts?
No.
No, that's a quiet no, but okay, I'll take that no. No, the president doesn't have that right. The president will then have to submit a request to Congress to hold funds or to do something else with the funds than what Congress appropriated it for. Any question? What question you have of me? Let me pause for a few. And let me gauge my, okay, so I'm checking the comments to make sure I don't have any questions there. All right, we're going to continue. All right, so who apportions funds? OMB. All right, so quarterly, the agencies also have to submit an expense report, which is called the SF-133 to OMB also. So they also have that requirement. So remember, Congress appropriates, Treasury issues the Treasury warrant. That's one thing. The second thing is the apportionment process begins. 10 days after appropriation, the agencies submit an SF-132 up to OMB. OMB has 30 days to fulfill their apportionment. Then the agencies submit an allotment to their subordinates, and we commit, obligate, and we outlay funds. What does outlay mean? Outlay.
Expenditures?
Expenditures, right? Or what is the common word that we normally use in our disbursement, right? We normally say disbursement, but in the study guide, the preferred term is outlay. Outlay, if you look up the definition, is pretty much saying when the funds are removed from the Treasury to pay an obligation, that is an outlay. So the final step is the outlay, is the payment. All right, so Congress has these rules, do's and don'ts, limitation, guidelines on the appropriation. How do they check to verify that we are following those rules? How does Congress ensure that we follow the
verse 5, the GAO?
the GAO oversight, right? What does GAO stand for? We don't want to play with acronyms. Government Accountability Office. So the GAO is an independent auditing agency that works directly for Congress. Their job is to ensure that we follow the rules that Congress established. So if I say the GAO provides oversight of the executive branch, is that a true or false question? GAO provides oversight of the executive branch. Is that a true or false question? And it's not directly in the book. It's just you have to think about the process and how things flow. Well, is the GAO providing oversight of the the legislative branch? So if you think about it, who generated the budget request, budget estimate submission? Who generated the budget? So let's walk it back. Okay, let me ask it a different way. By law, who's supposed to submit the budget to Congress no later than the first Monday in February? All right, I'm looking Facebook. What you got? Phone line? Come on, somebody. The president, right? So did you know that the president is the one? OMB, we said, already worked for the president, the executive branch. The president submits the budget to Congress. So when the budget is approved, it's a federal budget. There you go. Thank you. I see president. So when the budget is approved, it's approved for the executive branch. So we all fall under the executive branch. And so the statement that the GAO is providing oversight of the budget for the executive branch is still correct, because it's the press bud. We say these terms, yep, press bud. We send our budget estimate submission. So we use all these terms, but understand, yes, it's the federal budget, the president's budget, the nation's budget goes from the executive branch. So when it's approved, GAO is technically providing budget oversight of the executive branch. Any question with that? I wanted to clear that up because I know I've seen that question somewhere else. Okay, I have no question. We'll go ahead and proceed. All right, what are the majority of the ways in which the country makes its revenue? What are the ways? So the majority of the ways in which the country earns revenue. Individual income tax. What is the other big pocket of money that they get?
Social Security.
And it comes out your check. You look like, man, I hope I live for Social Security and Medicare and all this stuff. Because what it says, 51%. I need my glasses. Hold on. 50% and 36%. So 50% of the revenue that comes to the federal government, so that's half, comes from our individual income tax. And for all of us who are paying out the yin-yang for taxes, Social Security and Medicare is the other big pocket of revenue. We say raising revenue. And now let's talk about on the other side, our expenditures. So we got 100% expenditures, and how much percentage load of mandatory bills do we have? And if you use the updated study guide, 70% of the bills that the government has are mandatory bills. And like sick pay, we say what? Must fund. And so that means the discretionary pocket is only 30% to do everything else. Defense, education, right? So that's why you say, well, why aren't our teachers paid more, or whatever questions is asked about the budget, because of 30%, there's not a lot to go around after that. And of that 30%, how much does the defense budget take? How much do we spend?
15.
So about half, right? A little, and actually it's 15.3, so a little over a half the deal. So whenever they're talking about cutting expenses, you should not, if you work with DOD, you should not be surprised when they say, okay, DOD, we need to cut some of this defense budget or defense expenditures, because we spend over half of the nation's discretionary spending. Remember, when you take the exams, again, it's not going to be broken down by sections. It's not going to be telling you this is competency area 2, manpower management. It's not going to be like that. It's just going to ask, and I think it's all of them is 80 questions for a 2-hour exam. I'm just going to repeat some of this stuff since a few of you are new to the CDFM exams. Let's see what else. What else? For those of you who've already taken the exam, what are some other things that people need to be aware of when taking the exam? Another big one, okay, so it's closed book, so you're not going to have your book with you. You need to remember basic math in case you have to do some basic calculations. So those are just some of the things. So I may do another session with test taking and tips and so forth that we've accumulated throughout. All right, so let's see. Can the president activate forces, reserve forces? Does the president have the right to activate reserve forces? Yes, I hear a yes. Under what title? That's the bonus questions. Under what title? And if so, okay, so not even, go ahead. Title 10, U.S. Code Title 10, and the section is 12304. That should be easy to remember, right? Because it sounds like 1234. So under Title 10, U.S. Code, the president can activate reserve forces. What are the conditions that he must meet, that must be met for him to do that without having to go to Congress? Because remember earlier we said that Congress can declare war and so forth, and although the president is the commander-in-chief, he cannot activate the forces. So we just said on the Title 10 U.S. Code 12304 that the president can activate some foreign reserve forces, but what are the conditions that must be met? So it has to be 200,000. Well, even before the numbers. So terrorist
No more than 365 days.
Right, so 365 days, but what are the conditions that says he can activate them? What type of threat must the country be under?
Threatened use of weapon of mass destruction or terrorist.
Right, so anything to do with terrorist attack or weapons of mass destruction. Those are the conditions that must be met before he can even consider activating forces. And we said he can activate them for no longer than a year, 365 days. And then what were some of the other limitations there? I think I heard someone say 200,000 members of the reserve. And of that 200,000, what is the limitation on the individual ready reserve personnel, IRR?
40,000.
No more of that 200,000. So the limit is 30,000 of that 200,000 can be from the individual ready reserve. So there's a lot of information in that one section. I also told you for the manpower management section is to ensure that you know how to calculate the fill rate, the turnover rate, the time from when a position, the total number of positions, and how long that position's been vacant. So you have to know how to do the calculations, because this may be an area in which you have to use pen and paper. And again, no calculator, no cell phone, nothing other than this thing up here. And for most of us, we used to using a calculator or some other aid, and it's a little rusty. So make sure you review those sections. All right, let's talk about buyout ratios, voluntary separation, and early retirement. What are the restrictions on those?
Number,
Hello, go ahead.
is the calculation the number of budget positions that we're doing with, that we have to calculate for the exam in terms of work hours?
Right, so if you look on page 1 to 13, that chart, they give you the formulas in there for all of them: full-time, turnover rate, fill rate, lapse rate. So those are the ones that I'm referring to ensure that you know how to do those calculations. Because if they give you the values, you will always get, just like life, you get more information than you need to calculate the problem. So it throws people off because they're thinking they have to use every value in that question. So you have to know, okay, what numbers do I need to take out of what they gave me? So they're not just going to give you just the numbers you need to do your calculation. If they write the test right, and I used to teach the PPBE course at Fort Jackson, and part of writing the test is, yeah, you have to give, because in real life you get more information that you need to do your calculation. So we were trained to do that. So I can almost guarantee you'll be getting more information in the problem than you need to calculate to get the answer. So the DoD separation incentive, they talk about authorizing the voluntary separation incentive and the early retirement. What are the restrictions on the Department of Defense for buyout separations a year? How many separations can they do via buyout?
No more than 25,000.
25,000. So DoD is restricted to 25,000 buyouts a year. And for the buyout payments, what are they limited to? What is the amount?
40,000.
40,000, right? So they say the lesser of. So that also tells me if my, what they call it, severance pay. If my severance pay is more than 40,000, this is telling me they only gonna pay me up to 40,000. And oh, by the way, you know you're gonna have to pay tax, so you're not really gonna walk out with 40,000. So you may want to consider. So employees that accept the buyout, can I accept the buyout today and then quit, get out the DoD, and then 6 months later I try to go work for the DoD? Is that the right process? Do I have a timeline I have to sit out?
And you have to be out for a year?
You have to sit out at least for a year, 12 months. So if you take the money to get out, you get out. And people used to do that because I've been around the military since, 1989, long time ago. And people, throughout the years, people would accept money to get out. And they think the grass is green on the other side. And then later on, if they want to come back, you're just restricted to that 12-month period, sit-out period. And 12 months is the same for different jobs. Like if you get out of uniform and to come back and working for a contractor, you usually have like a 12-month cooling off period and so forth. If you notice, I'm also overlapping information from the other sections, because again, if all you do is focus on the module 1, if you were like me back in the day when I did my test, I only focused on module 1, I only focused on 2, and I did them in order because I didn't realize you didn't have to. And so by the time I got to module 3, and I'm like, hold up, some of the same information is in the other sections, and the other sections provided more details. So as you're studying and you finish, go through module 2 and module 3 looking for the same topic. Like a big example is working capital fund is covered in module 2 and 3, and then it may be tested in module 3, but module 2 have more information on that topic. So you might want to also do that. Do not just study them in a vacuum. All right, OMB Circular. Which OMB Circular covers the budget process? Office of Management and Budget, they provide guidance, policies. Which OMB Circular, which is the document that they provide, let me look at my comments. Oh. Hold on. All right, which OMB Circular deals with the budget? OMB Circular A, you said 111. OMB Circular A11. Make sure I'm saying that right. Governs the budget. And we also talk about OMB Circular A76. What does A76 talk about?
Commercial activities.
Commercial activities. Okay, well, what does that mean? Commercial activity. What does that mean? What am I trying to figure out in commercial activities?
Most-efficient organization.
Okay, you throwing these words at me. Okay, I see you. All right. So what he's saying is we're trying to figure out if we want to keep a function inherently governmental, meaning government positions, or we hire contractors to do a particular function. And so since we have someone already answered, let me ask the question that goes with it. What is the name of the government structure when it comes to determining that competition between the government and a contractor? What is the name of the government structure? What does MEO stand for? So it's MEO. What does MEO stand for?
Most efficient organization.
The most efficient organization. And so that's the competition. And again, I always use the example of, oh, hold on, I got one question. Let me see what page. So the page was 1, 2, 13. Give me a sec. Page 1, 2, 13. All right. All right. So performance work statement. What is the performance work statement? I'm going to just assume that everybody knows what that is. Performance work statement. What is that? What is that document?
It kind of breaks down the job.
Okay.
What
Okay.
things you have to do
Okay.
in that job.
So it breaks down, it details all the functions, everything that you have to do for that job is published in a performance work statement. Because if the government's doing it, the MEO structure, that's the government structure for doing the job, and then the performance work statement is the document that tells everything that needs to be done. That is the one that's sent out for bid by contractors. In order for a contractor to win over the government, what is the stipulation? What is the percentage that it has to be lower than the government costs? So the contractor bid has to be at least 10% of the MEO, of the government personnel costs, the government costs. 10% factor. Does Congress have to be notified if we plan to do a commercial activity work study? If we're trying to think about going from government to civilians, do we have to notify Congress? And if so, why?
Yes.
Well, why? Why do we have to notify Congress? And before the why, then, at what point do we notify Congress? So, what point?
If it involves more than 46 personnel.
So 46 positions. So these are government civilians, DOD civilians. If it affects and this is for the study. This is even before you get to that decision to say, yep, we want to go. If it affects 46 positions of DOD civilian position, Congress must be notified. And that's on the DODI 4100.33. Is what the rule says. What about your employees? Do they have to be notified that a study is being done?
Yes.
It makes sense, right? And if you've been around long enough around the DOD, I'm sure you've been participating in one of these where they come around and say, okay, I need for you to detail everything that you do. From the time you come in, well, not all the coffee breaks and smoke breaks we take. Let's leave that out. But let's just put in, okay, phone calls, reports that you have to run, briefings you have to do, and you have to detail everything on that. All right, let's switch to ethics, right? Because ethics, which is fiscal law, is in all of the exam. So we not only look at it in Module 1, we also look at it in Module 3. Can I accept a gift from a contractor? And if so, what am I limited to?
You may accept if the value is less than $20 and $50 or less for a whole year from the same contractor.
Okay, and she said it all. $20 is the limit on per gift, and the total from that same contractor is $50 annually. So that's in an annual year. Another big ethics part we always talk about is gifts to a superior. What are we limited to? $10, right? When someone comes around and say, hey, would you like to donate? The boss is leaving. You're limited to donating $10. And again, it's a choice, but you don't have to give any more. Like sometimes they try to coach you. Well, you're a GS whatever. Maybe you can give more. Nope. You could throw this fiscal law at them and say, no, I'm only giving $10. So you don't have to be pressured for anything more. Can I accept a gift from a university? If they invite me to come to be a guest speaker, can I accept money from them? And if so, in what condition? And the proper term is an honoraria. I'm being honored. Honoraria. Can I accept money to go speak at a university? Was that at first? Let's go with that. Yes or no? Yes? You said yes? Yes, you can accept money.
Yes, sometimes.
Sometimes. When is that time possible? Let's say, and again, let's say you graduated from the University of North Carolina, and University of North Carolina say, Helen Thomas, we would like you to come and speak to the graduating class. You are an alumni of this university, and we want to show what great things you're doing out in the world. Can I accept money then? If they say they want to pay me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What condition must it be for me not to be able to accept the money on the honorarium?
If you're invited as a speaker and if you're representing the DoD or any organization you're involved?
Right. If you're representing anything in your official capacity, I am the chief executive officer for the Department of Defense, whatever department. If they invite you, so it depends on what grounds they invited you. If they invite you because of your official capacity, no, you cannot legally accept honoraria, money from that university. And if you're not sure whether you can accept the money or not, what are you supposed to do? Or what should you do?
Check with the legal.
Check with your legal folks, right? Go to your ethics lawyers, right? We go to them when we ask about contract. You need to go to them also when you talk about accepting funding. All right, let's switch gears for a little bit here. Let's talk about, let's see, risk management, internal control. All right, y'all by now have heard my stoplight scenario. What does a stoplight, GAO stoplight, mean? Red, yellow, green. We get guidance from the Government Accountability Office. All right? So what does the red stand for? The GAO red book deals with what? Appropriation. GAO yellow book.
Audit.
Auditing. And the GAO green book deals with
Internal control.
internal control. That's just a technique that I use to remember. Again, you can get guidance from GAO. When we get guidance from OMB, it's typically called OMB Circular. When we get guidance from the DOD, it's typically a DODI, a DODI, DODI instruction, a DOD instruction. So for each section, you typically have guidance. So when we talk about internal control, it's the GAO Green Book. What is internal control from the OMB? What is that guidance called? The OMB Circular. And it's usually an A123. OMB Circular A123 deals with internal control. And at the DOD level, what is the instruction? What is it? It's DODI. Go ahead.
5010.40.
5010.40. The reason I'm pointing that out with internal control, because it's probably one of the only one that actually has the guidance from each of the levels. OMB, it gives you guidance. GAO and the DOD level. Like the DODI 5010.40, as I mentioned, make sure you know it's 0.40, because if you see 0.20, 0.30, 40, and 0.50, you need to be able to know it's 0.40. And as I mentioned, I think this is the 0.40 is the only one that's covered in depth in these study guides. So that should make it easier to remember. What are the GAO standards for internal control? There's 5 of them. GAO standards. So you have control environment, right? That means you got to put activities in place to control, put controls in place. And then they also list the different activity, how you do that. What is the second one?
Risk assessment.
Risk assessment, right? I told you. Every decision you make, there's a risk associated with that decision. So no different. So in your organization, depending on whatever decision you're going to make, there's a risk associated with that. So risk assessment, control activity, information and communication, and monitoring. Of those 5, which one do you think is most important? If you had to pick one out of all of them, which one you think is most important? And there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just asking.
Control activity.
Control activities, okay, because you put in, like when we do separation of duties, right? I think that's a control activity. What about, I pick monitoring, and I tell you why. Monitoring is the same thing as what GAO does, because monitoring, if you do not check to make sure people are following the rules, what are the chances you think everybody's doing what they're supposed to do? So for me, I think monitoring is the most important. All right, what are some different types of deficiency? When you do an internal control, you do an inspection, and then you have different types of deficiencies. What are they that you can identify?
Modified and modified.
Well, that's when you rate yourself at the end. But you have control deficiency. That means you're able to control it. Those significant deficiency. And material weakness. Okay, of the 3, which ones are internal versus external?
Control and significant deficiencies are reported internally, whereas material weakness will be reported outside.
Right. So if something, and again, I'm sure you'll have guidelines to know, okay, if this happens, just like when we do in our organization serious incidents report, if these incidents happen, that's got to be reported to your higher. So material weakness is the same thing. If anything of these on this list happen, it's a material weakness, because that also means a material weakness also means it's not only going to affect your organization, that means other organizations may be having the same problem. So it's a bigger problem than yours. So material weakness. And as far as the reporting, I think is what we were alluding to before. What are the 3 classifications of an internal control assurance report? I was trying to think of the word. So you said unmodified statement of assurance. What does that mean? What does unmodified mean? Statement of assurance. So it means I have how many material weakness if it's unmodified?
None.
I have none, right? I have 0. So it's unmodified. Think about it. I didn't do anything. Nothing happened. I'm following. We have all the measures, the processes in place. So I have 0 material weakness. That's an unmodified. If you have 1 or more, it's modified. And then the third one is statement of no assurance. That means no matter what we do, we still cannot reasonably assure that things will be done without fraud, waste, and abuse. All right. When the president, so see I'm switching gears on you because that's how it's going to be on the test. When the president receives a bill, what time is it? Okay, we got 15 minutes. When the president receives a bill, what are the options the president have? He just signs it and it becomes law? He signs it and become law. Okay, that's one option. What else options does the president have?
Veto.
He can veto.
Veto.
Veto. And veto means what? I send it back? Veto means what? What is veto? Right? So he doesn't agree with portions of the bill. Well, why can't I just mark out what I don't like and then just sign it and become law?
The line item veto was signed in 99, something like that.
think it was 98, something like that. But anyway, the line item veto was rescinded. During President Clinton's tenure, he was allowed to line through items on the bill that he didn't like or agree with and then sign the bill. The bill became law. It's been rescinded, so it means if the president vetoes any portion of the bill, the entire bill must go back to its originator. Okay, so we said he vetoes, he signs. What else can happen then? How can a bill not be signed but still becomes law? How is that possible? And you said pocket veto. Okay, let's deal with the pocket veto. What is that? What is that difference between that and just a regular veto?
Pocket veto is when the Congress is not in session, and the 10 days elapses, then the president doesn't have to sign the bill, and that will become a law.
Outstanding. So pocket veto, the president doesn't have to do anything, but the key thing is Congress is adjourned. Congress is not in session. So if the president receives the bill, Congress is not in session, and he does nothing with that bill within 10 days, it does not automatically become law. Then how does a bill automatically become law if the president doesn't sign it? That's a different scenario. So is it possible for a bill to become law without the president signing it?
Yes.
Yes. I hear a yes. How? What are the conditions?
If Congress is in session and the president doesn't sign the bill and doesn't sign it within 10 days, that's Sunday, and then it becomes the law.
Right? So it does not sign, but it automatically becomes law because Congress is in session. The president receives it and does not sign it within 10 days. That bill would automatically become law. Can the Congress override a veto? And if so, how much is the vote that they have to override a presidential veto? So I hear yes.
From both houses.
Okay, so what's the percentage he can override the veto? They can override the veto.
7%.
Two-thirds.
2/3, right? So if 2/3 of Congress, and remember, Congress is the House side and the Senate side, so they have to come together to resolve their differences. When they come together to resolve their differences, what is it called? Recapping. The conference committee. So when they come to that conference to resolve their differences, it's called a conference. What's another name for conference committee?
Chairman.
The third chamber. All right. What questions do you have of me? Or of anything that we've covered? So at this point, for those of you that are reviewing, again, you should be able to flip the page, look at a topic, talk about it, recap what you learned about it in the earlier competency areas, and be able to put it together. Even if it's asked, they ask the question in a different way. So I'm going to add, let me see what's next week. Hold on. I didn't originally have it, but since we had such a hard time last week getting online, I'm going to add another, let's see, that's February, that's March the 2nd. Yeah, March the 2nd looks good. So I'm going to schedule next week because I'm going to tie in the module 3.1, which is the fiscal law. And then what I'm going to do is just ask a series of questions. It's just going to be me throwing questions at you and you coming back at me with some responses so that you can get to the point. Let me remind you, you're never going to feel 100% I'm ready for this test. The only how you know that you're ready is if you could read just like when I say a topic and I say, okay, so after the budget gets to, the president got to submit the budget no later than the first Monday in February. He gets it from OMB. OMB sends it forward. Then once it gets to Congress, you got to be able to tell the story. What happens once the budget gets to Congress? Well, they go through the budget resolution process, then the authorization process, then the appropriation process. Then once Congress is finished, they send it back to the president for the president to sign for it to become law. Two things happen once the appropriation law is in place. Treasury issues a treasury warrant, and OMB goes through the apportionment process. So I'm doing that because, again, that is when you know that you are ready to take the exam. And only how you get there is repetition, repetition, repetition. Like you see me ask several questions over and over. When you get to a different part in the study guide and you know that it relates to something else previously listed, you need to go back in your mind and add that new information to it. Again, it's a story. Who done it? Why did they do it? Where were they? Why is it important to us? And so forth. All right. Any questions of me on anything we've covered up to this point in CDFM Module 1, Competency 1, 2, 3, and Module 3.1, Fiscal Law, because we also added some ethics in there, so that's Fiscal Law also. And then next week, I'll add the Fiscal Law piece to it, ask some more questions, and then I'm just going to rattle through some more questions. All right, I'll pause. Any questions? It looks like we are almost at a good stopping point. All right, well, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you all for stopping by. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM Study Group. If you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube page, please subscribe. It not only helps to notify you of new videos, but what it also does, it allows YouTube to push the videos out to more people, because more people is subscribing, more people is liking the videos, leaving comments, and so forth. So thank you all for stopping by. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM Study Group. I'll see you guys again next time.